It began with what seemed a routine morning television appearance. John Travolta, polished and composed, sat across from Michael Strahan in the bright, bustling Good Morning America studio. The cameras rolled, the energy was light, and for a moment, everything looked controlled and cordial. Viewers expected perhaps a few promotional sound bites, some banter, and then a smooth wrap-up. Instead, tension began to crack under the surface, as a single question triggered an eruption of emotion. Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Alright, now let's go back to the story. Strahan leaned forward, trying to strike that balance between playful and probing, and asked Travolta a question that seemed innocent enough, a whine about a controversial rumor or sensitive topic. The tone was casual but firm. Travolta's eyes shifted for a moment, his jaw tightened, and the warmth of a smile froze. In that instant, the air changed. The audience in the studio sensed a shift. The friendly chat had turned into challenge. At first, Travolta responded with restrained politeness, offering a measured answer, choosing words cautiously. He seemed to try to defuse the moment. But Strahan, pressing further, repeated or reframed the question. The questioning edged from curiosity into confrontation. The host's tone sharpened, the pace accelerated, and Travolta's patience began to wear thin. The polite veneer cracked as voices subtly rose. Travolta's voice, normally smooth and calm, took on a more forceful timbre. He interrupted, asserting that the premise of the question was flawed, expressing indignation at the insinuation. Strahan tried to hold the interview together, intervening to clarify or redirect, but like two heavyweights circling in the ring, both the men pushed back. The cameras caught every uneasy glance, every tightened fist, every subtle deep breath. As the tension escalated, the studio fell silent but for the mix. Travolta leaned forward, leaning into the exchange, demanding respect. He challenged Strahan on phrasing, tone, and intent. He accused the host of insinuation, of fishing for conflict, of crossing a line. Strahan responded, attempting to remain calm but firm, reminding Travolta of the public's interest, the journalistic responsibility, and the fairness owed to viewers. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Travolta's face reddened, his eyes burning with frustration. The host's polished calm began to strain. Strahan asked a clarifying question, perhaps to soften things. Travolta bristled and then he erupted. The actor rose, perhaps metaphorically, raising his voice, cutting the host off, refusing further insinuation. The back and forth turned sharp, raw, unfiltered. The control room must have tensed. Producers likely exchanged looks. The live broadcast could not be paused. In the studio, the crew froze. Strahan attempted to regain composure, offering a pause, offering a restatement, but Travolta, now in full emotional flow, would not yield. He demanded to be asked with decorum, to be treated fairly, to be heard without insinuation. The confrontation crackled on live air. Travolta's hands gestured broadly, emphasizing every point. He recounted past interviews, past experience with misinterpretation, the weight of public scrutiny. He insisted on clarity. If you ask me that, then you must also ask me this. His tone was equal parts righteous and frustrated. Strahan, balancing between host duty and maintaining decorum, injected calm appeals. Let's walk back, let me rephrase, I'm just doing my job. The audience watched in stunned silence. Some viewers gasped, others leaned in, hungry for resolution. Social media began to buzz, though in the studio all was confined to the moment. Strahan tried to pivot, to shift to a softer question, to de-escalate, but Travolta had seized the narrative. He would not be cornered, would not be painted. He pressed for respect, for balance, for nuance. Strahan, sensing the rupture, attempted a diplomatic retreat, conceding that the line of questioning may have been misjudged. He expressed regret, asked permission to move on, offered to shift to more comfortable terrain, upcoming projects, life, positive stuff. Travolta paused, took a breath, looked away, gathering composure. The studio held its breath to see if the actor would accept or continue pressing. After a beat, Travolta softened it ever so slightly, but his tone remained firm. He accepted the move, but warned against future encroachments. He reminded the host publicly, on lived vow that dignity, boundaries, and respect matter. He asked the audience to understand the pressure of fame, misinterpretation, and legacy. He then pivoted as if to move on, but the emotional residue hung thick in the air. The interview resumed, though the earlier warmth was gone. Travolta answered lighter questions, though carefully. He spoke of upcoming films, personal reflections, his career, and family. Strahan moderated gently, cautious now. The earlier dynamic had shifted. The host now showed deference, aware of the tension he'd provoked. The energy was subdued, wary, tentative. Travolta remained alert, eyes flicking at the cameras, at Strahan, at the studio lights. He engaged, but guarded. His earlier explosion had served its function. It had drawn attention, made a statement, reasserted boundaries. But now he was back in presentation mode, balancing authenticity and control. Strahan matched pace, careful questions, soft tone, fewer provocations. Some viewers later would interpret Travolta's reaction as overreaction. Others would praise him for standing firm. The interview would be replayed, dissected. Media pundits would call it a dramatic meltdown or a necessary confrontation. Social platforms would explode with clips, memes, comment threads debating whose fault it was, who misstepped, who handled it better. The segment ended, though not gracefully. The host thanked Travolta, wished him well, tried to close with conventional pleasantries. Travolta nodded, clipped responses, gratitude but restrained. The cameras faded to commercial. Behind the scenes, producers likely scrambled, replaying the transcript, assessing damage, preparing to manage fallout, PR statements, media spin. In the aftermath, Travolta's camp would issue clarifications, that the actor felt ambushed, that he felt certain questions were unfair, that he responded to protect legacy. Strahan's team might respond diplomatically, emphasizing the job of interviewers to ask tough questions, sometimes miscalibrated, but never maliciously. Press critics would dissect the balance between hard journalism and respectful discourse. Replays of the exchange would be clipped, shared widely, Travolta cutting off Strahan, Strahan attempting clarification, Travolta's burst of indignation. Interfaces would show highlights. Did Travolta just explode? Strahan caught off guard. Opinion pieces would wonder, was this authentic or performative? Should a celebrity absorb every probing question or push back when boundaries are crossed? For Travolta, this moment would join larger narratives, about celebrity, control over image, media invasiveness. It would be compared with other televised confrontations. For Strahan, it would be a caution, the line between curiosity and provocation. For viewers, it would be a dramatic spectacle, a reminder that even polished shows can crack, that live TV can surprise. In days to come, analysts would revisit the footage frame by frame. The moment Travolta's eyes shifted, when strain entered his voice, when he chose confrontation over compliance. Talk shows would replay, dissect, debate. Was he justified? Was the host at fault? Could it have been handled better? The incident would be cited in media training, in celebrity PR circles, as a case study in live tension. Ultimately, the show would move on. Other interviews would air, but this moment would linger in clips, in public memory, in Travolta's legacy. It would be remembered not just as an angry outburst, but as an assertion of voice, a stand for respect, a crack in the polished veneer of morning TV. And somewhere in all that, the public would ask, who was right, who misstepped, and what does this tell us about fame, control, and the price of being asked tough questions? In the hours following the broadcast, the internet became a whirlwind of clips and captions. Every major entertainment outlet rushed to cover the moment, spinning headlines about Travolta's meltdown or moment of truth. Hashtags trended across platforms, with fans fiercely divided. Some saw him as a victim of provocation, while others thought he'd lost control. The footage was replayed endlessly, dissected like evidence in a cultural courtroom. By midday, Travolta's representatives issued a short statement through his publicist. It was carefully worded, acknowledging the tension but stressing that John had felt cornered by repeated insinuations about personal matters unrelated to his career. The statement emphasized professionalism, reminding audiences of his decades in the industry and his consistent respect for interviewers so long as that respect was mutual. Michael Strahan, on his end, remained composed publicly. During the next GMA broadcast, he briefly alluded to a passionate conversation and thanked viewers for their messages. His tone was diplomatic but his eyes hinted at unease. Insiders whispered that the network's producers had spent hours in emergency meetings discussing whether to issue an apology or let the moment fade naturally in the news cycle. Behind the scenes, the production team reportedly faced scrutiny from ABC executives. Some staffers argued that the question which triggered Travolta's anger had been approved in advance, while others insisted that Strahan had improvised. Confusion and finger-pointing followed. Sources suggested that certain producers were asked to provide email records to clarify whether Travolta's team had been forewarned about sensitive topics. Meanwhile, talk shows and online commentators seized the story. Analysts debated who crossed the line. Psychologists were invited to comment on celebrity stress, while media experts dissected the ethics of confrontation journalism. Memes flooded social feeds, exaggerating Travolta's facial expressions and Strahan's reaction. The clip had become digital currency, shared, edited, remixed, and reinterpreted from every possible angle. Travolta, perhaps sensing the momentum, decided not to retreat. 2 days later, he appeared in a brief video message on social media. Calm and composed, he addressed his fans directly. He explained that while he respected tough questions, he expected fairness. His tone was reflective rather than defensive. "I'm human," he said, "and sometimes we all reach a limit." The video garnered millions of views within hours. That public address shifted the tone of the conversation. Many fans praised his openness, applauding him for owning the moment rather than hiding behind PR walls. Others, however, accused him of dramatizing the situation for sympathy. Comment sections filled with polarized debates, but one thing was undeniable: Travolta had reclaimed control of the narrative by speaking for himself rather than through intermediaries. Inside media circles, experts noted the sophistication of Travolta's response. He had managed to transform a potential PR disaster into a relatable human moment. By leaning into vulnerability, he turned outrage into empathy. Strahan, meanwhile, continued to maintain silence on social media, following the network's guidance to de-escalate through absence. The contrast between both strategies became another point of discussion. Producers of Good Morning America began to feel the ripple effect. Ratings for the following week's episodes spiked noticeably. Viewers tuned in, curious to see if the show would address the elephant in the room. While the hosts maintained professionalism, subtle tension lingered. Every interview that followed seemed slightly more cautious, slightly more restrained, as if everyone feared another explosion on live TV. Days later, paparazzi caught Travolta outside a Los Angeles restaurant. Cameras swarmed, but his demeanor was calm, almost playful. When asked about Strahan, he smiled faintly and said, "We've both moved on." That short comment, though simple, reignited headlines. Some speculated it was a peace offering, others saw it as passive dismissal. Either way, his public image began to recover. Within a week, Strahan reached out privately to Travolta. According to inside sources, the two reportedly spoke over the phone for half an hour. The conversation was said to be respectful, if somewhat formal. Both agreed that the situation had escalated unnecessarily. No official record of that call existed, but leaks from insiders hinted that the two men had cleared the air enough to avoid long-term hostility. Entertainment insiders soon revealed that Travolta's next film campaign had unexpectedly benefited from the attention. Online searches for his name spiked dramatically, and trailer views for his upcoming project doubled. Some cynics accused his team of orchestrating the confrontation for publicity, though there was no evidence. Whether by luck or skill, the incident had amplified his relevance in pop culture once again. Meanwhile, ABC executives commissioned an internal review to evaluate how the GMA team prepared high-profile interviews. The goal was to establish clearer boundaries and pre-approval processes to prevent similar flare-ups. New guidelines were drafted quietly, emphasizing emotional intelligence, guest sensitivity, and crisis management on live air. Ironically, Travolta's explosion was shaping future media protocols. Public interest remained high for weeks. Late-night comedians joked about the incident, with skits mimicking Travolta's intensity and Strahan's nervous calm. But beyond humor, Deeper discussions emerged about celebrity treatment. Was it fair to prod personal issues during professional appearances? Should stars be expected to tolerate anything for ratings? The debate blurred lines between entertainment and ethics. Travolta, though visibly calmer in subsequent interviews, carried an unmistakable new edge. When asked about the confrontation later, he would smile and say, "That was a moment of honesty." Fans noticed the subtle shift. He seemed more assertive, more willing to challenge narratives. It wasn't the meltdown that defined him, it was how he transformed it into a declaration of self-respect. Strahan, too, learned from the ordeal. Colleagues noticed he became gentler in tone during sensitive discussions. Though still confident, he seemed more empathetic, listening more carefully to guests' comfort levels. Insiders said the confrontation humbled him, reminding him that even seasoned hosts must balance curiosity with care. The moment had changed both men, in different but lasting ways. Months later, the clip continued circulating as a viral relic. New viewers discovered it daily, often without context, debating it as if it had just happened. It became one of those cultural snapshots that never fully fade, as a reminder of how fast modern media turns tension into spectacle. Travolta's expression, Strahan's composure, the silent studio audience, all frozen forever in pixels and memes. Behind closed doors, both teams eventually collaborated again, this time on a charity event. Travolta agreed to appear at a fundraiser co-hosted by Strahan for children's hospitals. The reunion was brief but cordial. Cameras captured a polite handshake, faint smiles, and a mutual acknowledgement that the past was behind them. The internet cheered the reconciliation, calling it a full-circle moment. Over time, the narrative shifted from confrontation to redemption. Journalists began writing retrospectives framing the clash as a symbolic turning point in celebrity media dynamics. Travolta was no longer seen as merely losing his temper, but as standing up to invasive questioning. The moment became a parable about boundaries in the age of constant exposure, a cultural flashpoint turned cautionary tale. And so, the saga closed not in chaos, but in quiet understanding. Travolta returned to work, Strahan continued hosting, and the audience moved on to the next viral spark. Yet, that fiery exchange on live television lingered like an echo, a reminder that even in the polished world of celebrity interviews, truth and tension can collide without warning, leaving behind lessons about pride, patience, and humanity beneath the spotlight. Weeks later, industry insiders reflected privately on what had happened between Travolta and Strahan. Some producers confessed that the entire event had changed how they viewed celebrity interviews. "It's easy to forget there's a person under the spotlight," one said. That realization began influencing future bookings, with guests now asking for topic lists in writing before agreeing to live appearances. Public opinion mellowed as time passed. What had been portrayed as a meltdown slowly transformed into a misunderstood outburst. Fans began defending Travolta more openly online, emphasizing his humanity. Others applauded Strahan for maintaining professionalism under fire. In hindsight, both the men earned respect, one for honesty, the other for composure. The storm had birthed mutual empathy. Entertainment journalists noted how the controversy revived interest in live television itself. Audiences, accustomed to curated, pre-recorded interviews, suddenly remembered the thrill of unpredictability. Ratings across several talk shows rose slightly, proof that people craved authenticity even if it came wrapped in discomfort. The Travolta-Strahan moment reminded everyone that live TV still carried risk and reality. Meanwhile, Travolta became more selective about his appearances. His team declined multiple interview requests, focusing instead on controlled environments like podcasts and long-form sit-downs. He explained later that he preferred conversations over interrogations. His approach earned praise for its maturity. "I learned to choose spaces that allow honesty without ambush," he said in a later reflection. Strahan also adapted. His producers began pre-interviewing guests more carefully, ensuring that tone and context matched expectations. Behind the scenes, he became an advocate for a new interviewing philosophy: tough but fair. It wasn't weakness, he argued, to respect emotional boundaries. "You can get truth without hostility," he told colleagues. The industry quietly took note of his evolution. Months later, during a film festival appearance, Travolta was asked indirectly about the GMA confrontation. Instead of deflecting, he smiled, acknowledging the event as a necessary moment. He explained that sometimes emotion speaks louder than rehearsed grace. "I didn't plan it," he admitted, "but it reminded me who I am." The audience applauded, and not the anger, but the honesty. That candid remark reignited media curiosity, but the reaction was now warmer, even sympathetic. Commentators praised Travolta's growth. The very incident that once threatened his image now enhanced it. It became part of a redemption narrative via a symbol of authenticity in a world obsessed with perfection. Travolta had turned a spark of rage into a story of resilience. Producers who once worried about fallout now referenced the confrontation during training sessions for new staff. Clips were shown not to ridicule, but to educate. They examined tone, timing, and emotional cues, demonstrating how quickly a conversation can shift from curiosity to conflict. Travolta's reaction became a case study, an unintentional masterclass in boundary enforcement on live air. Fans continued revisiting the viral clip, but now with nostalgia rather than judgment. Comments under the video shifted from mockery to admiration. "He stood up for himself," one wrote. "You can feel how real that was," said another. The collective tone online had softened, showing how time reframes even the loudest controversies into lessons of empathy and perspective. By the next year, Travolta and Strahan crossed paths again at an industry gala. Cameras caught them greeting each other briefly, exchanging a polite hug. The moment, though short, radiated reconciliation. Both the men laughed lightly, making small talk. Photographers captured a handshake that symbolized closure. The image circulated widely as two professionals turning a past clash into a gesture of maturity. In interviews afterward, Strahan described the reunion as refreshing. He admitted that while the confrontation had been uncomfortable, it led to greater understanding. "We both grew from it," he said. Travolta echoed that sentiment, remarking that the incident showed the importance of standing tall without burning bridges. Their mutual humility turned what had been tension into testament. Critics later called the event a turning point in how talk shows handled celebrity narratives. No longer were emotional outbursts dismissed as drama, they were seen as windows into the pressure cooker of fame. Producers became more transparent, audiences more forgiving. The Travolta-Strahan exchange had quietly shifted the tone of celebrity culture from performance to presence. In a reflective essay months later, a media columnist compared the confrontation to iconic live moments of television history, instances where authenticity broke through polished presentation. She argued that Travolta's outburst wasn't failure, but courage. "It's not the anger we remember," she wrote. "It's the truth that leaked through it." That line was shared thousands of times online. Travolta himself began to speak more openly about emotional health in the entertainment industry. He gave interviews emphasizing self-care, mental resilience, and the right to express frustration respectfully. "Actors are people first," he reminded audiences. His advocacy resonated with younger performers who admired his willingness to confront vulnerability without shame. As months passed, Strahan and Travolta found themselves inadvertently linked by history. Journalists often mentioned one when writing about the other, framing them as two sides of the same story, and one representing the media's voice, the other the artist's defense. Both accepted this association with grace, understanding that the shared past had shaped their professional growth. Documentaries about media culture began referencing the confrontation as an example of authentic friction. Experts analyzed it alongside other high-profile TV moments, suggesting that such incidents remind the public of humanity behind celebrity facades. Travolta's fierce insistence on respect became an emblem for anyone who'd ever felt misunderstood under bright lights. Years later, the phrase Travolta moment entered pop culture slang, meaning a spontaneous burst of honesty on air. It wasn't mocking up, it was almost celebratory. People used it to describe when someone finally stood up for themselves in a public setting. What began as perceived rage evolved into shorthand for self-assertion. Travolta had unknowingly coined a cultural metaphor. Meanwhile, Good Morning America carried on, refreshed by lessons learned. Its team leaned into empathy-driven journalism, balancing curiosity with compassion. Ratings held steady, audience trust deepened, and the show's legacy strengthened. Even Travolta later admitted that he still watched occasionally, especially when Strahan's interviewing someone brave. The final irony was that both men gained more than they lost. Travolta's career experienced a late resurgence, and Strahan's credibility as a journalist deepened. Each carried scars, yes, but also wisdom. In Hollywood's whirlwind of image and illusion, they had lived out a rare public lesson, that conflict, handled with reflection, can evolve into growth for all sides. And so, years after that fiery morning, what remains isn't the shouting, nor the awkward silence that followed but the enduring reminder that truth, once spoken, never fully fades. Travolta and Strahan's clash lives on not as scandal, but as story, a vivid chapter in the book of live television, where emotion, honesty, and humanity refuse to be scripted away.